what truly lies beneath the briny waves of the vast, bottomless ocean.
A few years ago, I stayed on the Queen Mary for a weekend with my mom, my sister, and my stepdad to celebrate my mom's birthday. We're all somewhat exhausted by the paranormal, so we decided to take a ghost tour of the famously haunted ship. Honestly, there were countless bizarre things that happened on that tour, but the scariest part was what happened in a notoriously haunted stateroom. This is a room that had previously been one for guests to stay in, but they eventually stopped allowing guests to stay in it and completely stripped it down because of how many guests were reporting terrifying experiences in it. This was in 2017. As of 2018, room B340 is now available to stay in once again. Our tour group was led into the room, and the tour guide started talking about the reported experiences in the room and gave a name to the reported entity who inhabited it. I don't remember their name, so for the sake of the story, let's say it was Jim. The tour guide kept saying Jim this and Jim that, and out of nowhere, I started to feel totally enraged. I'm talking violently enraged. I wanted to tackle someone and beat them senseless, and I'm normally a completely non-violent and passive person. Over and over in my head, unrelentingly, all I could think was, my name is not Jim. My name is not Jim. I couldn't stop it. I was so angry. I was getting dizzy. I was nauseous. I felt totally overwhelmed, and like I was going to collapse or kill someone. It was one of the worst paranormal experiences I've ever had. I ended up walking out of the stateroom before the tour group was moving on, and as soon as I did, the feeling released. It was unforgettable. I think whatever lives in that room truly had a hold of me.
About a year before I got stationed on my last ship in the Navy, an officer hanged himself in his quarters. I don't remember much about him, but I think he had some family and financial issues that drove him over the edge. Fast forward to about 1.5 years into my service there, and I was mess cranking in the wardroom, assisting the cooks with maintaining and serving the officers in the cafeteria. One night after the dinner shift, one of the cooks and I were walking the corridors and came across the previously discussed officers' quarters. The hallway cut slightly left and dead-ended directly at the door, so it was a lone room in the ship. Since his passing, they couldn't get anyone to stay in there because crazy shit would happen regularly. Well, me and my buddy, being who we are, we said let's go check it out. As we're rounding the corner to the room, we start hearing a rattling noise. Neither of us thought much of it. It was a large ship and pretty steady on calm waters. But things rattle and roll occasionally. As soon as I touched the door handle, however, we heard a huge boom in the room, like something had been thrown hard from inside. I let go of the handle and said something like, "I'm sorry to have disturbed you," and we walked away. A few days later, might have been the next day, I can't remember, we go back with a third person in tow. Likewise from previous, we heard the rattling noise going up to the door. But this time, before I grabbed the handle, I asked, "May we have permission to enter?" Like you would ask an officer prior to entering the room. The rattling stopped and it was silent for a few seconds. Taking that as approval, I reached up and grabbed the handle, pausing briefly, then turned the knob and opened the door. Inside was just a cluster of mess. Like nobody ever bothered to remove his things and even added more to it. We all felt this heaviness in the air and a feeling of sadness, and nobody dared to step foot inside. Feeling like our mission was complete, I said something like, "Thank you for your time," and we left. We heard a bit of rattling as we walked away.
This was about 6 years now, in early 2014. I'm a merchant mariner, and at the time, I was working on an American-flagged car carrier in the engineering department as an oiler. My whole life growing up, I've had some rather strange things happen. I've seen some things and I felt some things, but this is the first time I've had it happen on a ship I was working on. I was on the midnight to noon watch with the third engineer. When I was in the middle of my readings one evening, I happened to notice an orange blur in my peripheral vision on the deck below, which was the lowest deck in the ER. I turned my head and caught just a glimpse of orange coveralls walking down the shaft. This wasn't the engineer or anyone else in engineering, as we didn't wear coveralls. Our work outfit consisted of cargo, mechanic pants, and whatever shirt you owned. The deck guys, however, did wear orange, so I finished up my reading and walked down to the lower level to find him, the guy. I thought maybe it could have been the AB on night watch, but they don't make rounds in engineering spaces. But whatever, so I go down there, and no one's there, whatever. Probably just tired, I thought, and I finished my rounds. After finishing up, I turned in the sheet to the third in the control room, and then stepped back out to go start on a project. When I saw the door to the tool room machine shop flap closed, again, I thought probably a techie down here to steal a tool or something. So of course, I go to the shop, and as I enter the shop, the door to the storage room was just closing. I continue to follow, but there's no one in the storage room, and the only other way out would be through steering and up onto the main cargo deck. I continued into steering and gave a quick glance around again. I found nothing. On my way back out, I glanced into the hydraulics room where I finally saw him. He was facing away from me, looking at a panel, and I almost just walked past. I caught myself mid-step and shouted over the sound of steering pumps to get his attention. The man jumped and was turning around when the ship lost power. Losing power was nothing new. The shop has had a faulty shaft generator for a while. It was pretty standard. I didn't think anything of it until I got my flashlight out of my pocket, and the man was gone, like he was never there. I looked around, but nothing. I was starting to get a little nervous and jumpy at that point, but right before panic could set in, the diesel generators kicked in and the lights were restored. I returned to the control room to ask the third if a decky had left the engine room through there. He said no. Cut to a few days later, I was talking with the boat's one mate in the deck lower when I noticed the picture hanging, almost as if it were a memorial, and I asked him about it. The boss said it has been there for a while. The ship used to be Swedish flagged, and they had a death aboard back then before it became US flagged. I sort of went quiet, then told him what I saw a few days ago, and he just goes, "Oh yeah, we catch glimpses of him roaming the cargo deck sometimes too. I didn't have anything else happen that trip, and we even got the shaft generator fixed in the next port. But still, it was still sort of wild having that happen, and the last place I'd never expect."
I work in the offshore oil and gas industry, oil field for short, and the work that my crew and I do often has us working with our equipment set up on board ships called offshore supply vessels, owned by another company. Also, I live and work in Asia. We normally have a crew of 15 to 20 packs on the job site at any given time, and we don't have specific shifts like day or night. We just work whenever the requirement arises or the client requests, day or night. In most cases, this means we'll be working 24 to 36 hours straight. This one time the client engaged our company to charter a supply boat and set up our equipment on board to do a job at an offshore drilling rig. Our equipment is huge, 800 horsepower, 20 foot by 8 foot large diesel driven units each, and pretty much occupied the whole deck of the boat. Things started up normally. We set up the equipment, took a week's hard work, sailed out of port, got to the drilling rig on schedule. There was some other operational stuff going on, so we waited on standby near the rig for a couple of weeks, floating about and killing time. This is where the fun starts. I mentioned earlier we had about 15 guys on my crew, and there were 20 guys who made up the boat's crew. Plus the boat isn't that huge, so there's always another human being probably within shouting distance. It started the night we got on location. At breakfast, a couple of my guys were sitting all zombified and exhausted. They said they had a bad bout of sleep paralysis. Now, this can happen occasionally, especially, or should I say as a result of, really hard physical exertion for prolonged periods. So the moment you collapse and have a good deep rest, your body can, in fact, experience what seems to be sleep paralysis. No biggie, since we'd spent a whole week, day and night, rigging up heavy equipment and piping. We shrugged it off, went back to sitting around shooting the breeze. After all, we had a couple of weeks of nothing to do on standby, so with plenty of rest, it wouldn't happen again. We were wrong. The next night, a few other guys got it. Then the following night, a few other guys experienced it too. And every single night, random guys experienced it. There was no pattern. There was no exception. Eventually, everyone had experienced it. Some reported being able to open their eyes and seeing a dark figure pressing down on them in their bunk beds. A couple more religious ones tried reciting prayers during the episodes, only to have the choking, pressing feeling intensify. Morale was taking a beating. Isolated cases in the past we could laugh off, since there was a reasonable explanation and correlation to the physical work we did. This time, something was very wrong. The whole crew was getting it, and we literally had zero physical work at all. Still, we gave each other what moral support we could to get through the days and nights. And in the mornings, we knew. The tired, drawn expressions, the sunken eyes, the dark circles. We knew who it had come for the previous night. That's not all. If you've worked offshore, you'll know sometimes standby time is the hardest because you quickly run out of ideas to pass the time. So we got busy, found things to do, started running through the preventative maintenance and startup checks on our equipment, running the units so that the moment that we got the green light from the client, we would be ready to go at full throttle. It came at us there too. Strange sounds on deck amongst the equipment. I was on deck one evening after dinner with 5 other guys working on one of the diesel engines. Suddenly, a huge metallic boom rang out from the aft deck. It sounded like someone took a 10-pound sledgehammer and slammed it into one of the metal bulkheads. I got up to go aft to check it out, thinking it might have been a loose lube oil drum or one of the units not being shimmed properly. The supervisor grabbed my arm and said,
"Not now. Tomorrow, in daylight."
I was about to protest, but seeing the look in his eyes, I backed down. In the morning, me and the other guys went to check the aft deck. Nothing. Equipment skids were shimmed tight. Everything secured, tight as they should be. And the previous night, there was nobody at the aft deck area. But every night from then on, the same boom, the same place without fail. Another thing, the vessel's crew refused flat out to say anything when asked about these things. Sure, they were friendly and great guys to work with, but when this topic came up, they simply clammed up tight. And weirdly enough, they also absolutely refused to ever come out on deck after nightfall. Daytime was fine. They would help with any request at all, but after dark? Nope. Want a spare part from the deck store during the day? Fill out forms, wait outside while the bosun goes and gets it for you. After dark, it's a free-for-all. The deck crew, not even the fussy bosun, would come out on deck. The final straw came once it was time to finally get to work. For context, we had an electrician who was a white American, Jack. Awesome guy, chill and skeptical when it comes to weird happenings. He was the one guy in the crew who could laugh off everything that happened and said we were imagining things. So, in a way, he helped keep our sanity, important for later. The job starts. The big diesel units are running at full throttle. Listen to the 3,000 horsepower choir sing. Everyone is giving it their all, and we're done in about 24 straight hours. Client is happy, time to sail home. Crew shuts down the equipment, pats each other on the back and heads to the locker room. It's about 2 a.m. at this point. Wait, where's Jack? Jack was curled up in a ball in the locker room, in a tiny gap between the lockers and the wall. A mound of cigarette butts on the floor at his feet, rocking back and forth, chain-smoking furiously. He doesn't chain-smoke. He was pale, shaking, eyes wild, and muttering over and over again. What the fuck, man? What the fuck did I just see? What the fuck was that thing? We heard what happened from our mechanic. He was with Jack at the aft deck when they both saw a white, man-sized bundle fall from the drilling rig and into the sea with a loud, audible splash. Hang on. These guys are standing right behind the diesel engines, 140 decibels loud, with earmuffs on, and they heard a splash? Jack was really excited, thinking it might be a man overboard, wanting to throw him a life ring and jump in to save him, when the mechanic grabbed Jack, pulled him back from where he was about to climb over the railing, and dragged him backwards. Jack started to argue when they saw something moving in the water. For context, it's dark, midnight. You're out on the open sea. The sea is choppy. If anyone fell into the sea in these conditions, good luck to you. This thing they saw, it was submerged and coming towards the boat, making a V-wave as it came. Jack continued arguing as if in a trance that it was a man overboard. He needed to rescue the person, started climbing the rail again. The mechanic slaps him and says,
Jack, whatever that is, it's not human. We're fucking going. Now.
Next thing we know, we found Jack huddled in the locker room, out of his damn mind. Couldn't even muster a coherent sentence. Took him a couple of days to regain his composure after that incident. Thankfully, the journey back to the port was short, 20 hours sailing time. We were all too motivated to disassemble all the equipment as soon as we reached the shore and get the hell off that boat in record time. Thanks for sticking with me, if you managed to listen all this way. It's a long story, but it was one of the scariest and weirdest experiences I've ever had in my whole career. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed that video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already. A very big thank you to my special guest Lucid Lupus for joining me on this one. If you haven't already, I highly suggest you go over and check out his channel. He has an amazing catalogue of content and is a fantastic narrator. A huge thank you to all the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. Links to everything will be in the description below. As always, thank you all so much for your continued support. I really do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.